When I saw the acid burn a hole near my feet, I realized that this spider was hiding a trump card up its sleeve, and I was running out of time. If this continued, I'd be done for. I needed to shorten the distance, faster. Right now, I used my active jerk skill, and in the blink of an eye, I was in front of the monster. Instantly, the distance between us was gone. At this point, I activated the paralysis effect. I wanted to end this as soon as possible, but I couldn't deliver a critical hit. I needed to accelerate even faster, but I was a little short. Ginho watched me. He saw how fast I was moving, but he knew that my stamina would run out if I kept this up. I approached the spider, so close now, but my fatigue was already at 70%. At one point, the spider swung its massive foot at me, but it flew off, leaving a huge hole in the ground. I saw it prepare for another strike, its final one. And that's when I remembered I had a status recovery effect. I applied it just before the massive paw reached me. Now I was over the spider. I thrust my dagger right into its eye. I yanked it out and delivered several more blows. The paralysis effect activated, and the spider began to bleed. My opponent was losing 1% of its health every second. I kept striking, more and more punches, until I finally landed the crushing blow. The system notified me. The dungeon boss had been defeated. My level went up, and I felt a rush of excitement, knowing I'd soon get my daily quest reward, but I still couldn't shake the feeling of what might have happened. Ginho stood to the side, watching in disbelief that I had single-handedly defeated the boss. He looked at me horrified as I grinned while slicing through the spider, gathering up its magic crystals. At that moment, Ginho approached me. He offered to carry my magic crystals in his backpack. As he held out his hand, he said, "You must be thirsty. Take this water." I didn't understand what was happening, but then he picked up a pickaxe and began chiseling away at the mana crystals. That's when it hit me. I was something of a savior to him, but then the passageway that had been blocked collapsed, and the guys who had abandoned us, they were approaching. They walked in, led by a man who couldn't believe his eyes. We were still alive. The boss was dead. They didn't understand how we could have overpowered it. They probably thought the spider was just dumb and big, not realizing that Ginho had rattled it. That's how we won. The leader, though, he underestimated us. If he had known the special properties of his equipment, maybe he could have killed the boss himself. But he didn't. He had no idea. And now, he saw Ginho as an asset. He approached Ginho and told him, "I've looked you up on the internet. Your outfit is too conspicuous. You're the son of a big shot, aren't you? The chairman of Eugene Construction Company. It's definitely your father." But Ginho just said, "So what?" The leader continued, "I figured you came from a wealthy family, but for it to be this true, let's talk business. I'll give you a chance. Kill Sung Jinwoo. Kill him and join us. It's the only way to survive. Otherwise, you'll both die here." He didn't understand why Ginho hesitated. "No one will ever know what happens here. We're still in the dungeon," the leader insisted. Ginho turned to look me in the eye, but I told him, "It's okay. No wonder you betray me. After all, I'm weak." But suddenly, Ginho took my side. He decided to fight with me. The leader sneered, "It's stupid to kill the rich man's son. Deal with the weak one first." As they approached, I saw the system prompt appear. Emergency quest. Kill 8 enemies. My heart pounded. I didn't understand it at first, but the system had given me a new quest. I saw it. There are subjects nearby who intend to kill the player. Eliminate them, or be killed. Failure would stop my heart. At that moment, there was an explosion. I flew back, slamming into a nearby wall. Dazed, I turned and saw them laughing. "His skills must have deteriorated," one said. "After that hit, he should be dead already." The leader cut in. "Take it more seriously." The man who hit me shook his head. "I put all my strength into that magic attack, used up a lot of mana. How is he still alive?" I was furious, serious. "You're playing with people's lives, now you'll pay the price." They didn't get it. They didn't understand me. I kept getting closer. "Since you're hunters, you should be prepared to be hunted yourselves." The first guy stepped forward, smug. "I'll handle him," he said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "You don't seem to get your situation." Before he could say another word, my blade was at his throat. One swift motion, and he dropped to the ground. The others were shocked, but I didn't stop. "I've got 7 more to kill." The leader looked at me dumbfounded. He didn't see when I had drawn my dagger. But that didn't matter anymore. I had to kill or be killed. The system might have forced me into this, but excuses wouldn't change the fact that I had killed. The mage began another attack, but I dodged, moving faster. "Your magic only annoys me." In an instant, I cut through my second enemy. Everyone who was looking at me, those bastards. began to run at me with the goal of finishing me off. As soon as they got close, I managed to kill my third enemy. I cut off his arm and stabbed him with my dagger. He fell to the ground, and the others, they were terrified. They couldn't understand how I could move like that. They couldn't hit me. I was too fast for them. But I knew, sometimes, hunters can be game for a tougher hunter. Now it was their time. At one point, I activated my paralysis skill. The body of one of the attackers, frozen, unable to move. They thought it was magic. But no, I was just too strong. Janelle, watching from afar, saw it. He knew I was stronger now than when I fought the dungeon boss. When my bleeding paralysis hit, those guys were in agony, writhing in pain, unable to understand what was happening. But it was too late. They all fell to the ground. Only one remained, their leader. He couldn't believe it. He realized I had been hiding my powers, and I was the one who killed the dungeon boss. He didn't expect all his men to be defeated, so he decided to show me that not all rangers are the same. He used reinforcement, flying straight at me, screaming that it didn't matter what kind of monster I was. After a boss fight and 7 hunters, I should be exhausted. But what he didn't know was that I was already near him. I grabbed his head and slammed him to the ground. He didn't know I had kept raising my level. I stomped his face into the dirt. When he raised his head, he saw me standing over him, blade in hand. He began to beg for mercy, promising me money, mana crystals, magic stones. I didn't understand why he was begging. He tried to kill me 3 times. I ordered him to be quiet. No one would ever know what happened in that dungeon. He started screaming something about his little brother. Before he could finish, I cut off his head. I stood there looking at my torn clothes. They were getting a little small. It was time to get something new. But when I got back, I saw Jinwoo was sick from what he had seen. That's when I realized the boss of the dungeon was defeated, and we needed to leave as soon as possible. Meanwhile, in Washington, USA, someone had a beautiful morning. A guy woke up, wondering what time it was in Korea. He'd had a bad dream. His eyes were moist, as if he had cried in his sleep. Later, in one of the buildings, a man approached the manager of Gene CH, explaining something had happened. 8 people had died in the dungeon, but 2 hunters, D and E rank, had survived. The manager was informed they had just escaped, but the other man said no, they had cleared the dungeon. The Durang hunter, Jinwoo, had a different outfit. Maybe that's why he could defeat the boss, the giant arachnid Barura. It was strange. 8 people died, but Barura wasn't dangerous to organized groups. The manager was skeptical until she learned that one of the survivors was Hunter Song Jinwoo, the one from that incident. The manager dismissed it at first, not wanting to become paranoid, but the other man couldn't let it go. One of the dead hunters was Dong Suk. The manager realized this couldn't be left alone, especially with connections to Hunter Hang Dong Su's brother. At that time, I was at home in my apartment, sitting with my sister. She asked why I'd bought chicken wings. Something was clearly wrong. She knew me, knew I was a cheapskate, but what she didn't know was that I had a different problem. No matter how much I drank, I couldn't get drunk. My body, immune to poisons, thanks to the system's reward. My sister looked at me more seriously now, realizing something must have happened in the dungeon. Later in my room, I decided to test if all the negative effects were automatically canceled. Sure enough, they were. But suddenly, my sister came in and asked if I knew anyone named Joe. He was calling me. A little later at the cafe, I met Joe. He offered me coffee, but I declined. He thanked me, calling me his savior. I smiled. He had shared magic stones with me, earning me money, almost $900 after taxes. Joe was nervous, knowing I was hiding my rank, knowing what I was capable of. Then he told me he wanted to start his own fighting guild. I refused. I wasn't interested in babysitting rich kids. But Joe got up and said all he needed was my help. 19 times. He wanted me to go to the dungeon with him 19 times, and he promised to split the loot fairly. I told him that hunters not only kill monsters, but people too. He knew the horrors, yet he was still determined to assemble his battle group. Eventually, I asked him if he wanted to be the head of the guild. He confirmed it. He was sure of himself. After all, he had connections.